From the European Parliament here in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight, and this is what we have on the menu for you. Gender gap. Ahead of International Women's Day, why is Europe falling behind in political parity? Remembering Salisbury. 1 year after a brazen Novichok attack, did Russia escape justice? Useful idiots. Hungary's Viktor Orban lashes out at members of his own political group. Algeria unrest. Protests erupt across Europe as Algeria's president confirms he will run again. And no escape from Macron to Merkel to Trump. A parade celebrates the best in political parity. Well, it is time to meet our panelists this evening. We have, of course, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor. Darren, what story are you watching?
Looking at the Russia story and Salisbury, it is extraordinary that we are, a year on for that, not least of all for the people of Salisbury. You have to remember who is still, to a degree, having their lives disrupted on a daily basis because of it. But it is interesting, has that attack, despite the sanctions and the solidarity at the time, really shifted geopolitics? You'd have to conclude in the grand scheme of things.
Has anything changed?
Probably not.
Good question. All right. Also joining us tonight, Petra Kumpula-Natri. She is a Finnish MEP with the Socialists and Democrats group. What are you watching?
International Women's Day on Friday, so it's up on the agenda, the gender balance in the parliament and national parliaments. But I almost say that also Orban, once again this week, I have to follow what's happening. Not only that, it's also the Finnish EPP sending a letter to the EPP to handle whether it can be a member, but he's quite open. He started already to say that he's challenging Timmermans, our wonderful Spitzencandidate, is his next target.
That Orban cannot grab the headlines in any
No, he hasn't grabbing the headlines. All right, also joining us tonight, we have Mina Tolu, an MEP candidate from Malta for the Green Party. What are you watching?
I'm also watching the gender gap story as a candidate from Malta, where we see it's different. In our national parliament, we have very little female representation, and then our MEPs here, it's a 50-50 split. So
it is quite interesting as a topic. All right, and that is exactly where we are going to begin, because as the world prepares to mark International Women's Day, and in the middle of the European election campaign, a report is highlighting the lack of gender parity in Europe, and specifically here at the European Parliament. International Women's Day is an annual event held around the world and marked by strikes, protests and parties to highlight issues of gender bias, the fight for equality and women's achievements. Well, here at Raw Politics, we are kicking off a week of coverage with a fresh take on gender and equality every day this week. And that brings us to tonight's focus, political equality. Because when it comes to the European Parliament, men still outnumber women significantly. You could just take a look around here at the Parliament, you'll see that. Take a look at the latest report from the European Parliament. In 1979, 16% of MEPs were women, compared to 36% today. Now, that is a big increase, but still only 3 of the EU's 28 heads of state are women. And there has never been a female president of the European Commission. All right, so we're looking at those numbers. It is 36%. Some would say, actually, you know what? That's not too bad, considering it came from 16% in 1979. You've been in politics for 15 years. Do you feel that we're actually in a good position?
We are going to better direction, but I think in Finland it was a long time that it was more or around 40%, 35-40% women in the national parliament, as we got the right for vote in 1906 at the same time than Finnish men. But then I think we lost kind of appetite for talking about equality and this European phenomena in some countries that you really push down the women's right has been a good side for Finnish discussion also, that it's not self-evident that you always have only better direction to go, but these populist movements are not the best ones on the women's right, not at all.
Yeah, so from a man's perspective, Darren, is it half full or half empty, this 16 to 36%?
Well, it is extraordinary, and actually there is a graph, and it's not just confined to Europe, of women's representation in Parliament over the last 50 years, and it goes like that. So clearly there are blips, but it is on the whole going in the right direction, and that is welcome. And that is happening both at national level and here at European level. But you're right, when you look at those statistics and you see that only 3 out of the 28 heads of government in the European Union are women, that's awful. And, you know, the next EU president, who takes over from Jean-Claude Juncker in terms of the Commission, again, is still likely to be a man. And that's pretty bad. But it is also extraordinary that when you look at the countries that have got the highest representation of women in the world, we often think it might be in places like Finland or Scandinavia or the developed world. It's actually places like Rwanda and Cuba and Bolivia and Namibia. It is actually the developing world.
I would say the Philippines
Africa
too. I mean,
and Latin
anecdotally.
America, that we have to learn from, that are actually leading by example.
No, that's a really interesting point to raise. Now, Mina, I want to ask you, because you are running to be an MEP, what are the barriers are you experiencing in this campaign?
Well, to start off with, I'm a young person, so that's in and of itself is a barrier into entering politics.
And a novelty.
I guess. But as people who are not men, because I do not identify as a woman, I'm a trans non-binary person, we do have more barriers, just reactions, for example, online. If I say the exact same thing that a male politician is going to say, the kind of backlash that I get is much harsher. Sexist, misogynist comments I mean, there's definitely much more there. It's quite
where is it coming from? Do you think it's the underrepresentation, the misrepresentation? What is it that is fueling this kind of behavior in people?
Well, as has been mentioned already, there is starting to be a backlash towards women's rights, towards minority rights, perhaps LGBTI rights across Europe, and it's easier to hide online and hide behind profiles online and then make this what might be considered in a normal face-to-face conversation as perhaps being extremely rude or hurtful as almost normal. There's a normalization of sexist comments online and misogynist comments online.
And I think what's interesting from someone from Malta, and you raised it earlier, is that in Malta, in national elections, actually, the percentage of women who make it into positions is actually quite low. But here it's 50-50.
Yep.
It's really good. Why is there a difference there? Is it a cultural difference? What is that?
Well, I think we need to see the barriers. When the Maltese Parliament is a part-time job, it's not a full-time job like the European Parliament, so that constitutes an extra barrier for women to enter politics. It's also a men's club, right? Sure. And not only is it a men's club, it's a lawyer's club or it's a doctor's club. It's certain people from privileged positions in society having their own networks that are able to make it in there. And we're not just talking about candidates or actual politicians, but also staff, party members, executive members of parties.
There is that barrier to actually entering politics. I just want to bring in another graphic that we have, because in every EU member state, we're talking about national parliaments, there are more men in the national parliament than women, as we have been seeing. Let's take a look at the winners and losers in this aspect. The EU average is actually 73% male politicians, 73%, that's high. Some countries are doing better than others. Now, Sweden and Finland top the list at 44% and 42%, while Romania and Hungary are propping up the table at 12% and 9%. Well, if we go to Finland and look at the numbers in Finland, why is there such a difference? What has been done that has actually elevated Finland to that level?
I do not look at the Finnish MEPs as women or male. I must say that out of 13, when we elected, there were 10 or 9 with the experience of being a minister, cabinet minister, and members who've been negotiating in the council. So quite high level this time. But then also that it's not even a mixture anymore that you go for social issues or environment only. I'm doing digital and energy. There are people doing a foreign policy where I also think that worth mentioning Federica Mogherini taking the position of really foreign relations of the union at the moment. But it's already there in the structures that you don't have those glass walls that much. But we have been members almost 22 years and we never had a female commissioner. So now there is appetite to question us that why on earth a Nordic country never nominated
Probably
anyone.
It's about time. Probably. So I just want to point out, Darren, because in the report it was saying that one of the suggestions, the solutions to dealing with parity is to impose quotas. But that feels really forced. I mean...
Well, the thing is, it has worked before. So, for example, the UK has tried all-women shortlists, or certain parties have, and that has helped massively increase the number of representation of women in Parliament. And sometimes, when the barriers, the glass ceilings are so high or so strong, then actually it is necessary to step in and to do that. And clearly, women's ability to access political parties and get selected is more difficult than it is for men, particularly, it must be said, with certain parties in certain parts of Europe, it is tremendously more difficult. But then you also have to look at how this place is run in terms of the hours and the congeniality it is to family life. And also what potentially are the things that are deterring women from entering into politics. And again...
Like in Malta,
examples actually that women particularly, politics can be an aggressive business sometimes, and women do tend to get an awful lot more abuse for their political views than men do. Again, why is that? It's a wider societal problem.
Absolutely.
But these things all need to be looked at, because when you look at this place, which is meant to be not just to represent Europe, but be representative of Europe, it really is not on many levels.
Do you accept that as politicians? Or, like, oh, well, this is the way politics is, so we're just going to get a harder time anyway?
We can take about quotas on the elections, but when you have a list system, we doesn't have it in Finland. But then also I looked the institution, EU institution. If you count 11, European Parliament being only one of them, Commission and second one, and Council with Prime Ministers and Council and all that, you have 2 women out of 11. So it's also what kind of person we nominate as the highest official to represent EU and institution, and it's something we cannot be satisfied.
All right, I will leave it at that. We were saying that here at Euronews, we will be covering women's issues, different angles of it, different aspects of it in the week leading up to the International Women's Day. All right, moving on now, because several European cities saw protests this weekend over a decision from Algeria's president to stand once again in national elections. Now, for more on the demonstrations, let's cross to Lyon and our team in the Cube. Alex Morgan, what do you have for us?
Well, Tessa, let's take you to Algeria today. People posting from there on Snapchat. We know this is a very rare sign of mass protest. It's rare for Algeria to see the scale and the consistency. Many students driving this. Let's take you into Sétif and onto the campus there. We can see here students from this afternoon braving the midday heat as they, midday sun as they were, to stand and protest, demanding that the president renounce this attempt at a 5th term. This after a weekend of protests. You can see here, this filmed on a Snapchat, people posting this directly from that location, so we can be sure it's coming from people there on the ground. You can see also the size of these crowds too, and the time of the day, middle of the day there. And that was in one city. We know this has been protests right the way across Algeria. Let's take you to Algiers yesterday. Look at the size of this crowd at the Technology College just outside Algiers itself. It's a slightly blurry video, but the scale of the students you can see there, it gives you an idea. Then we can take you to central Algiers and the University of Algiers. Look at this. This is the news camera picture showing you students barricaded in by riot police in the campus. And this, a post on Instagram from students on the other sides of those gates, demanding things change. Now, let's just show you the kind of posts we're talking about, the kind of hashtags driving this movement. This is one here, no to a 5th mandate, and its equivalent in Arabic, being perhaps 2 of the most common tweets that Shauna, Emmanuel, and my team here in the Cube have been seeing as this movement continues to grow. Now, we know, of course, that the president has written a letter. He's written a letter acknowledging what has now been roughly 10 days of protests. And in this letter, he directly references the young people. He says, let's bring it up for you here. If I can just bring this up. It was read aloud in Arabic on state television, so we have not seen from the president himself. But this is what he said. I have carefully heard the cries of the protesters, especially those of our youth, who have addressed me about the fate of our nation. The letter goes on to say, fine, I'm not going to stand for a full term. If I'm elected, I'll stand down, his advisors say, within a year, and there will be another election which he will not contest. So, obviously, we in the Cube asking the students who we've been talking to, Shauna talking to many who were nervous actually about putting their name or face on their comments. We asked them, does this make any difference? Are you likely to take this letter and stop protesting? Well, have a look at this. This is what one student, a 20-year-old, told us. Bouteflika's letter only made matters worse. It's revealed the government's intentions of continuing the corruption instead of putting an end to it, in the words of that 20-year-old student. So, Tessa, the protests continue today. Students telling us they are not going back until the president renounces this attempt at a 5th mandate.
Thank you for that, Alex and our team in the Cube. And joining us now to discuss this is Peter Jahr, German MEP who sits with the European People's Party group here at the Parliament. Good of you to join us, Peter. So when Algeria was generally untouched by that wave of the Arab Spring, relatively compared to its neighbours, is this a turning point?
I hope so. I hope. What should I say? I hope that the country find the solution inside. Because you see what's going on. The democracy live on transparency. Democracy live also from a kind of change, and the people want to have the change.
But he said that he will.
At least they realize this. At least I hope they realize this.
And we've seen protests in France as well. Is this going to be a headache for France?
Potentially. I mean, it is really interesting because Bouteflika is not necessarily, he's not comparable to many other leaders that we've seen during the Arab Spring. Well, not least of all, he is a former president of the UN General Assembly. He is someone who essentially helped bring about a truce in Algeria 20 years ago, hence why he's got an awful lot of respect in a civil war with Islamists that saw the deaths of 200,000 people in that country. So, he's clearly, and has been up until recently, well regarded. The problem is that he's very ill.
Sure.
He's not been around and seen in public at all, really, for the last couple of years.
And who is running the country,
who is running the country? And clearly, he is now in a Swiss hospital. Should he be running for a fifth term?
Well, there you go. All right, but there's not just protests in Algeria. We will stay with that topic because now let's go to the Balkans, where there are anti-government protests which brought people out into the streets this weekend. A lot of them. Let's take a look. Two different countries, two very similar protests. Tension hit the Balkans this weekend, thousands marching in Montenegro and Serbia as they seek to bring about reform to their respective governments. In the Montenegrin capital, Podgorica, the streets filled for the fourth Saturday in a row. Protesters there calling on President Milo Đukanović to resign over alleged corruption, cronyism and abuse of office. Meanwhile, 450 kilometers away in the Serbian capital of Belgrade, similar scenes. As people take to the streets to call out what they see as the increasingly autocratic rule of President Aleksandar Vučić and his influence over the media. With both Montenegro and Serbia seeking to join the European Union, these are developments which will be watched closely back in Brussels. I'll ask you, Mia Petra, is there something brewing in the Balkans that could prove to be a bigger headache for the EU than it actually thinks, especially countries that want to be part of the European Union?
Yes, of course, we keep on track every year the development, what way is it going, and it's, of course, when you see unrest among the citizens, it's not the good sign that open democracy is going.
The EU to do more, actually.
Yes, we do have a good contact, and then we have a very high, good requirement to be a member country, and that really requires open democracy, and then anti-corruption should be looked at very carefully. We do have a problem sometimes that you enter the country, enter the membership, and then it's more difficult to follow the track where how the development is going. So I think the dialogue in between the EU and will continue.
But the questions people have for countries like Serbia and Montenegro who want to ascend to EU membership is, well, actually, when you look at it, would, for example, Poland, Hungary, Romania, would they be allowed to join the European Union today? In their current state? Good question, Darren. Oh, there you go. Bigger question indeed. All right. You can think about that one during the break. Yes, indeed. Because coming up on Raw Politics, 1 year after a brazen Novichok attack in Salisbury, we'll look at how the incident changed relations with Russia and whether Moscow escaped justice. Plus, with friends like these, Viktor Orban attacks members of his own political group as, quote, useful idiots. That's coming up. Welcome back to Our Politics. Now, a year ago today, a man and a woman were found collapsed on a park bench in the British town of Salisbury. But when it emerged, the man was a former Russian spy, Sergei Skripal, who had been poisoned by the nerve agent Novichok. The drama played out like a jet-black farce with very real consequences. Now, diplomats were expelled, sanctions imposed, suspects pretended to be spy-loving tourists, and innocent bystanders lost their lives. Now, Russia maintained its innocence in the face of international condemnation. Theresa May returned to Salisbury today to mark the anniversary. Let's take a listen.
What I've seen today here in Salisbury is the tremendous spirit and resolve of the people of Salisbury. This has been a difficult year for them, and particularly difficult for the immediate victims of the reckless attack that took place on the streets of Salisbury, the use of a chemical weapon, a nerve agent on our streets.
Just a quick reaction to Theresa May's statement there.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking, and if you think about it, it's one of the most brazen attacks we've ever seen in European soil against civilians like that. I think the bigger question we have to ask now is, a year on, what have the consequences been for Russia? You know?
All right.
But it wasn't helped by the fact, that the British government sent out a tweet saying that solidarity was with the people of Salisbury, but used a picture of another British city called Bath, which wasn't terribly great today.
And just to let our audience know who's joining us today, we have Andrew Byrne. He's a Brussels correspondent with the Sunday Times. And still with us, we have Peter Yar, German MEP sitting with the European People's Party group here at the Parliament. And still with us also, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor. All right. Yes, because Theresa May's reaction, especially last year, it was also quite hard. She said it was likely Russia. That's what she was saying. Or has she said enough?
But maybe I will start with a political summary. That is German wording that say you can only dance with the people in that room. That means we need a relationship to Russia, because Russia is our neighbor, and that's why we need a relationship. And what could help? The only thing what could help would be, I call it, independent investigation. We need it. We should need it in the beginning, but now we also need it.
Yep.
On the other side, if we do nothing, one sentence,
Okay.
if we do nothing, then we have the strange situation. We have two different truths on the way. Russia has its own truth, Great Britain the other. That's why we need just like an investigation.
It's not Russia on one side and Great Britain on the other. It's Russia on one side and essentially the rest of the world on the other.
Okay.
And yet Russia will be a neighbour, and that is a physical truth that Europe will not be able to get away from. But also, if Russia is responsible, and as to say, most intelligence agencies around the world do think they are, I mean, it cannot be acceptable that yet again, because this has happened before, that Russia is allowed, the Russian state is allowed essentially to kill people on British soil.
Did anything...
chemical and biological.
Yes, we were talking about this, Darren, before the show. I'll ask you, Andrew, did anything change? Did we learn any lesson from the investigation and from how all this unfolded in the last year?
Well, I think we learned lessons, frankly. I think we learned lessons about just how far Vladimir Putin's government is willing to go to publicly punish those who transgress the Russian state. Have there been consequences for Russia from these actions? It's hard to say. There's been sanctions on some individual Russian oligarchs that have felt consequences. We obviously had the expulsion of dozens of Russian diplomats suspected of being intelligence officials. But, I think realistically, there's still, Western European capitals, most notably London, are still nests for dirty Russian cash and shady activities by characters linked to the Russian state. So I think realistically, looking at this, I think I saw Alexei Navalny, the opposition figure in Russia today, said that the sanctions that have been introduced following Crimea and the expulsions following the attack in Salisbury have not really had. Not worked. Is that a reason not to do them? I don't think so. But I think we have to, question how you deal with a character as brazen and as unpredictable as Vladimir Putin.
I mean, it must be said that this is a reaffirmation of kind of, Putin does hold grudges against people, even if it is decades later. I think the intelligence community in Britain would suggest that the expulsion, actually, of the Russian diplomats, who may well be spies themselves, has harmed Russia's approach. But it is interesting that actually, Salisbury, Schiphol was probably in retrospect for Russia a massive mistake that did not work out. And for everyone, for the strategic gains that people think that Russia make in places like Crimea, you have to remember, like in Montenegro, where they were behind potentially a failed coup, didn't work. Look at Macedonia and Greece last year, again, didn't work. So while Russia kind of, in some ways, is trying to shape geopolitics, it's not winning on every front.
But Peter,
do you
disagree?
No, I want to say why we don't take the last chance to say, OK, European Union go a step by side, Russian go step by side, and then we try to make an independent investigation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know that.
But we've had an OPCW investigation into this already.
On the other side, we have two truths on the way. You can read in the book.
Look at...
I'm close on the side from the European Union. You know what I mean? Then if the Russians say no, then we have a better argument to say why Russians say no.
But there was an independent investigation that essentially said that the Russian state, in effect, were behind downing a passenger plane over Ukraine. and like killing hundreds of people. And yet, where has the I mean, if you're going to shoot a plane in the sky, where's the geopolitical movement on that? And it's the same with this attack in Britain. You know, there has to be consequences.
Peter, you wanted to say something.
No, I start or I end with a political summary. Russians are our neighbor. And we cannot take Russia away.
Wouldn't it be more productive?
We need a relationship. We have to talk with each other. There's no chance.
Okay,
who do you trust more?
I'd like to bring someone in from Moscow, actually.
I trust more in the European Union, of course.
Okay, hold on a second. We'll bring someone in from Moscow to bring us a bit more insight on this, because in September of last year, investigative journalists blew the case open, in fact, and identified 2 of the suspects in the attack. Now, reporters from Bellingcat and The Insider have since been tracking Russian movement on the case. One of them is Roman Dobrokhotov. He joins me now from Moscow. All right, so you have been tracking it, Roman, the movements, the Russian movements. Have they changed their tactics since the Skripal attacks?
We've lost.
It's gone.
Unfortunately, I think we have lost him. Oh, it would have nice to have gotten his opinion on that one, the journalist who broke that story. Okay, just last word.
Yeah, last word. I think what's interesting in the European response to this is how much there are still very different cultural attitudes in the bloc. And in particularly in Germany, you see the public opinion towards Russia is almost less sceptical than towards Trump in America. And I think that's an interesting divide, and that will be one of the divisions to be bridged between European countries.
There was relative solidarity, though, with the UK after the attack. And actually, you know, there was a European and US response to it. So
yeah, sure.
Maybe the Germans are taking a more practical approach. I mean, if that's the right word to describe it.
Got a lot
well, there you go.
Gas coming up.
We need
to point that one out.
We need just a solution, just like with Saudi Arabia.
Well, there we go.
It's another topic to talk about.
That's definitely for another day.
All right, well, staying in the UK, though, but now moving on to, yes, you guessed it, what else? Brexit. It's time for today's update, and it's all about the royal protection for Brits abroad and a scathing observation from the Danish Prime Minister. Let's take a look.
El objetivo fundamental es que ningún ciudadano británico o español quede desprotegido, ni él ni sus familiares.
Good news for Brits living abroad in sunny Spain, as its Foreign Minister, Josep Borrell, says they'll be protected in the event of a no-deal Brexit. By order of royal decree, the package will cover things like healthcare and social security, and offer residency to hundreds of thousands of people. But Mr. Borrell warned it's not a one-sided deal, and he hopes the UK will reciprocate such a generous offer. And it's not just expats who could be breathing a sigh of relief. Things could also be looking up for Mrs. May. That's after the EU's top Brexit official, Michel Barnier, said he was ready to give further guarantees on the backstop to help get her deal through. Interviewed by Die Welt, he hinted at a parliamentary move in her favour. But not everything is rosy. Denmark's Prime Minister still managed to cast a dark cloud over negotiations yesterday. According to reports from a party conference, he called Brexiteers, quote, conmen, and said the House of Commons was paralysed and on the verge of a meltdown. Ouch. All right, I want to ask you about Michel Barnier's comments on giving extra guarantees. The only way for it to pass in Parliament, in the British Parliament, is if it's legally binding. That's what MPs want, correct? So are we expecting a legally binding, I'll ask you, Andrew, legally binding changes from the EU?
I mean, I think we're expecting what the text that's being discussed by the negotiators now is a legal text. Is it a legal text that's going to change the essence of the backstop or the withdrawal agreement? It doesn't look like it, although we can't be sure. I think one of the most interesting things from that Barnier interview was that he essentially said his understanding is that Brexit will not happen on March 29th, even if the Parliament votes to accept it this week. So there's going to be an extension, it seems, and that raises all sorts of difficult questions about how long it should be.
Well, and the question is whether it's a technical extension that lasts merely a couple of weeks to try and get all the legislation through both parliaments, it should be said, because this one needs to pass it as well, or whether there has to be a more profound, longer extension, which would be very difficult for the European Union. But it's difficult to see, and it's interesting, in London, you're starting to see a kind of slight nuance and a slight change among some Brexiteers who seem more open to May's deal, potentially because Brexit might well be extended, or Article 50 for a long period of time, but also then the hardened Brexiteers setting out these kind of bullet points these kind of key
But they've
stars.
softened in general, haven't they?
Well, you know, they're looking for a ladder to kind of climb down from their position to potentially back May's deal. The question is, I'm not entirely convinced from what we're hearing that Barnier is going to be able to provide that ladder because they are looking for a fundamental change in terms of the legal guarantee of the backstop. I'm not sure they're going to get it.
Peter, how do you interpret Michel Barnier's guarantees, potential guarantees? And it was to a German
no, what should I say? Well, I'm tired about. I'm
tired of it.
My wish would be I would have a letter from London. What they want, a resolution from the Parliament in London would be the best. Because we are running in darkness. We send a letter, send another letter, and I would say, what's the Parliament in London will do?
How would you feel about I don't know, another 9 months or 2-year extension to Article 50? if you're already tired of Brexit,
maybe that's the joke. We postponed the Brexit. And then we forgot the Brexit. Maybe that's the solution. I don't know.
I'm not sure they'll get past
No. Now we need also, I would say, a decision from the Parliament in London. What they want. We know what they don't want, but we don't know what they want.
I wonder how common this reaction is. Peter's reaction, like, we're just fed up.
I'm tired about this discussion.
Well, next week we hopefully might get some
we hope.
I mean, I think the most promising thing
that 29th of March is we should.
I mean, I think a technical extension seems most likely, but that's assuming that the deal on the 12th of March, when it's voted, is adopted. But you know, I think the most promising avenue from the talks right now is a guarantee or an assurance from the EU to the UK that there will be a process, an arbitration process that will give them a route out of the backstop if they want to seek it. But that still falls short of what the ERGN.
Yeah, because that is an arbitration process. What they want is that the UK can unilaterally leave the backstop if they want.
Yes.
And at the moment, that would obviously contravene
May's deal
the
getting
withdrawal
through
agreement.
has actually had the likelihood of her deal getting through has gone up, hasn't it?
I mean, it has only by time, but she has to overturn the most enormous majority against it. And there are suggestions it might not take 1 but 2 votes, even in May's best case scenario. But it is still entirely possible that the UK will have a long extension to Article 50 with potentially a general election or very slim but possibility of a second referendum.
On that note, we'll leave Brexit there for now, but we promise you there will be more Brexit news coming your way. But we'll take a break on Raw Politics. A step too far for Viktor Orban. Why the Hungarian leader is turning on some members of his own political group by calling them, quote, useful idiots. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, useful idiots. That's what Viktor Orban is calling critics within his own political group at the European Parliament. The Hungarian leader says that those who want him booted from the European People's Party are playing into the hands of their left-wing opponents. It comes down to these government-sponsored posters you can see there, which accuse the Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker of promoting illegal migration into Hungary. At least 7 parties within the EPP have since called for the expulsion or suspension of Orban's Fidesz party, triggering an internal review on its membership. Now, in an interview with Germany's Die Welt paper, Orban lashed back at his critics, saying, quote, while they think they're waging an intellectual fight, they're actually serving the power interests of our opponents. All right, joining us in the studio to discuss this is Lily Bayer. She is a reporter with Politico Europe. And also back with me is Peter Jahr, a German MEP with the EPP Group and European correspondent for the Sunday Times, Andrew Byrne. Right, Liddy, I will ask you, Viktor Orban, why does he keep doing this? I mean, he seems to be enjoying what he's doing. I think, does it seem like he's doing this because it's his plan?
This is definitely planned. Viktor Orban is someone who is incredibly strategic, and what he knows best is the Hungarian voters. So I think any move like this that he makes, every time he starts a new campaign, he does these billboard campaigns across Hungary pretty regularly. He usually finds new enemies for them. He thinks of what will play best for him domestically, and I think he realized that for him, he needs to find a new enemy. He's already been attacking Hungarian businessman George Soros for a couple of years. So this current campaign targets both Soros and Jean-Claude Juncker.
But he will do that at the expense of his membership with the EPP group. That he will actually get booted out because now it's getting real. So he's not afraid of getting kicked out?
I don't think he's afraid, and the reason why I'm saying that is because if you watch Hungarian state-controlled media and government-controlled media, they are floating the idea that it wouldn't be so bad if Orban gets kicked out. So I do get the feeling that he may not want to get kicked out, but what is for sure is that he is preparing his voters for a possibility that he will no longer be a member of the center-right bloc.
All right, Peter, you've met him. You're in the same party as him, and you will have to decide on this on the 20th of March. What game is he playing from the EPP's point of view?
Maybe you say it very well, because I said again, we should accept we have European election, not national election, and we, the European People's Party, we want to fight in an election for a common goal of common targets. We want to win this election, but we cannot accept that somebody only takes the national card. That's not okay. And I have to say at first, and for me it's personal, a very crucial thing, because I come from Eastern Germany. We have so much sympathy for the Hungarian people. They help us destroy the wall. They help us, this Germany, come together. And
okay.
Now we want to wait and see what's going on the 22th of March.
I'll go to you, Andrew. But first, I'd like to bring in a German point of view, in fact, because over the weekend, Manfred Weber, who is a Spitzenkandidat, declined to rule out expelling Orban from the European People's Party. A first for him. In an interview with the Der Spiegel, he said, "I expect him to apologize and put an end to the poster campaign. Beyond that, we cannot simply return to business as usual. We will take concrete steps very soon." And that concrete step, we know that, on the 20th of March, the EPP will be talking about this. This is the first time that Weber has been like this. Do you think there's a shift, that there is a change there?
I think Weber is a realistic politician, and he sees now that his traditional support for, or at least tolerance of Orban, is now damaging his own political ambitions to become Commission President. I think Viktor Orban has placed the EPP in an impossible situation. I mean, if they keep Orban's Fidesz in the party, they essentially shelter and endorse an autocrat who shuts down universities, crushes the free press, and runs open campaigns against his own ostensible allies. If they throw him out, they lose potentially 12 MEPs in the next parliament, and it also helps his kind of bad boy image, which he benefits. So he wins in either scenario. So I think the question for the EPP is, you know, they're going to lose either way. Is it better to suffer a small loss to retain your political values, or is it better to just smile through the...
Do you remember Jean-Claude Juncker was saying, you know what, I became the Commission President, I didn't need those votes. How crucial are those 12 seats?
I think it's unclear, because we don't know yet what the European Parliament will look like. So we don't know if this will be, you know, a very minor loss for the EPP, or something that they will need to get a grand coalition, which they will have to build anyway. Because as you know, the European Parliament has always worked based on grand coalitions of mainstream parties. So it's not the EPP on its own, but it's what kind of coalition the EPP plus a range of allies can build.
Beyond go ahead, Peter.
I would say now we have in our party, in our European party, a new situation. I think 9 parties from 7 member states don't understand what's going on with Orban, and that's why we have not only explained something, not to say apologize. There have to be a big move, and I don't know if
So you believe he should be kicked out, and you think it's going to happen on the 20th?
If you have not such a big move. In the past, it was he go 2 steps forward, 1 step ahead.
But what could he do this time? What could he do this time?
What is that big move?
Have to delay his campaign in the end. He blamed the Commission. He blamed the Commissioner, President. That's out of thinking.
But as Leslie was saying, it doesn't seem like he's going to, because
doesn't do it. That's why I say we have so much pressure.
Are you not afraid that if he does get, because you seem to be really baffled why he's still with the EPP, but if he does, if the Fidesz party does leave, are you not afraid that there's an argument that this will embolden the more extreme way of thinking in the parliament, and maybe he will join ranks with other
Are you not afraid of that? We have a common goal, and if somebody is outside, we have to talk about it. I'm also very...
well, if they want to talk, but maybe he doesn't want to talk.
But I'm also disappointed about our colleagues. Our colleagues in the group make a very, very good work for the Fidesz party in our group in the European Parliament. But now, I don't know. He's sometimes he's outside of thinking. I don't know. And we need a real activity. I don't know what's going on. But if there's nothing, only say I apologize. That's too late.
Not enough.
There is one irony to the story, which is that for years there have been calls for Fidesz to be expelled from the EPP, and it is notable that despite the closing of universities and everything that's happened with the refugee crisis and so on, it takes a personal insult to Jean-Claude Juncker to force a decision on this matter. And
isn't that
I think that's interesting.
Lila, I'll give you the last word on this one when you look at when you analyse what's going on here.
I do think that taking a step back and looking at it from a Hungarian political perspective, it will be incredibly difficult for Viktor Orban at this point to take that step back, because he sent a letter to every single Hungarian citizen about this campaign and why he's attacking Jean-Claude Juncker. With these letters already being delivered and in the mail, how can he then go back to his voters and say, actually, I was wrong, I apologize?
So he's in too deep. He can't
I think he's in too deep.
Okay.
He probably calculated this, and even if he didn't, I think it's a bit too. It's too late for him to step back. Now that doesn't mean, though, and maybe you should be the one telling us, because I do think it is up to the CDU and the CSU at this point
to have
whether
that,
he leaves.
Well, we're seeing a change in the German sentiment, it seems, and we will be watching the EPP on the 20th of March. We will be watching, definitely.
Before Brexit.
There you go, before Brexit or not. All right, after the break on Raw Politics, should gender parity be mandatory in politics? That's one of the hot topics for tonight's edition of Your Call, and we want to hear from you. This is how you can get in touch with us. There's a free phone number on your screen, 00800 3333 7002. We're on Skype, email, and social media, Twitter and Facebook. Go look for us. Is politics ruining Eurovision?
Should British MEPs be banned?
What is the appeal of the likes of Viktor Orban, for example?
The vote has gone too political.
You should have protest songs and you should have a bit of spice in the mix.
Well, we weren't that popular before, were we? I remember.
And this, of course, is part of the reason why unelected bureaucrats hold so much sway in Europe, and why so many people in Britain find huge fault with that system of democracy. But I completely disagree with the previous caller.
Welcome back. That's just some of the highlights there from the last episode of Your Call. And now you saw there, people from across Europe have been calling us and telling us what they think of today's top stories. And now it is your turn. Your Call is coming up at 7 p.m. CET or 6 p.m. if you are in the UK. And here's what we're going to be talking about.
Bridging the gender divide, as a report finds women make up just 36% of the European Parliament members and 32% of European commissioners. Does Brussels need to do more to increase the representation of women? With the world gearing to mark International Women's Day, we're asking, should gender parity be mandatory in politics? Struck down the moment a rural English city became the site of the first chemical weapons attack on British soil. As the clean-up operation ends and the UK marks the one-year anniversary of the attack, the Kremlin continues to deny any involvement in Salisbury. So we're asking, did Russia escape justice? And escape from the Holocaust? That's allegedly the premise of an escape room criticised as anti-Semitic in Greece. Until recently, it was even called Schindler's List. Amid a rise in anti-Semitic attacks, critics say it trivialises the Holocaust. So we're asking, are people forgetting the Holocaust? Have your say, Europe. Should gender parity be mandatory in politics? Did Russia escape justice? And are people forgetting the Holocaust?
So that was Darren McCaffrey, who will be co-hosting the show tonight. And back with us is Andrew Byrne, and also May Faban, who will also be co-hosting. Now, the contact information you just saw on your screen, you can call us for free at 00800 3333 7002. Send an email to rawpoll@euronews.com. We will be bringing up all that information again later on. And on social media, use the hashtag #RawPolitics. All right, let's talk about the topics for tonight, Darren. So it was, should gender parity be mandatory in politics? And that was our first story for today. And I think this is probably what will get
I think the question is, do people want to see more women involved in politics?
I don't know, May, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I would like our viewers to call in and tell us, but people that I meet often say that they do, and they don't feel represented. A lot of women don't feel represented. They feel very much underrepresented, especially in the European Commission, with just 8 commissioners that are female taking decisions on their behalf. So many women I interview about this topic say, well, then women should vote for women. Without it becoming a battle, of course, between men and
women. And is it because people say that kind of women bring a different type of politics to the political game and to parliaments and to decision-making that actually men don't have? But I don't know, I mean, is
like
that
a more
true?
compromising approach, or less aggressive? Or...
Yeah, precisely. But is that true? I don't know.
I mean, I think voters, when given the choice, you know, female candidates are usually popular with voters. And the barrier in a lot of cases seems to be that parties don't select as many female candidates as they could, and so voters don't have that choice, the ability to vote for female candidates. So, I mean, the question is, do you bring in new rules to force parties to pick female candidates?
Would there be anyone who would say, oh, actually, no, I don't want to see more female politicians? Or is it because women have other roles?
If there are, you want to hear from them, they should call in.
We do, but
they may not think it's an issue. They may not think it's an issue.
Right.
Because ultimately, you know, as we say, this place is not necessarily very representative of Europe, but it's just not on women representation. So it's not represented the whole range of issues. But does it matter to you as a voter that the person that you elect doesn't just hold your political views, but also is in some way like you, so that you can identify with them because of their gender or the race or whatever?
Women. I mean, I don't think a woman would necessarily just vote because they're women, but there are a lot of issues that are barriers.
I would have thought potentially some would.
I don't know, as a voter, would you?
Well, it depends on the political views and the plans that politician has, male or female, what they want to do. If they're going to improve life for me, my family, and stuff like that, then perhaps you vote for them regardless of their sex.
Does it make you...
The fact of the matter is, look around in all the institutions in Brussels, you see men in suits everywhere, especially at conferences here as well. There's so many men. You often have about 5 or 6. I love men, and I love my male colleagues. I've been to so many conferences here in this town where it's been all men.
Does it make you uncomfortable? Does it make you uncomfortable as a voter, as an individual, when you see that?
It makes me very uncomfortable. I'd like to see a lot more women represented in the EU institutions.
Yeah, I think the big question for me is, I don't think anyone can deny that, but would it actually make a difference? Would we see different politics?
There's some studies that say women could be better leaders, as you were saying, because there were
successful leader in Germany at the moment, in Europe at the moment, is the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel.
All right, there are many ways to get in touch with us, as we have told you, and you can see them on your screen. If we can bring it up again, you can call us on a free phone number. It's 00800 3333 7002. Email us at rawpoll@euronews.com, or look for us on social media. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics, and also on Skype, because we want to see you as well. All right, we do have time for tonight's Raw Moment. It's carnival season, and as always, the political floats are out in force. Here are some of our favorites.
Good until I saw the one with Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, and Gandhi.
Yeah.
That was a bit weird.
I'm not sure they were. That was the Dalai Lama. It was the Dalai Lama. There you go.
I was like,
this is an excuse, I think, to poke fun. I don't know.
Such extravagant.
Why are you foreign bros?
What?
Both of you are like, what was that?
Well, I think it's remarkable. I think they're astonishing creations. I just hope they don't all get thrown in the bin the day after Carnival. They should tour Europe. We should all get the benefit of
in Las Fallas in Valencia, they get burnt.
like effigy.
It's a waste, isn't it?
I mean, they are very good. I
It's
did
pagan.
like the Donald Trump, Kim Jong-un one with the nuclear weapon on the wall. And I'm going to bet you, actually,
Well,
I think it was Gandhi.
I think it
'Cause
was the
they're all
Dalai
dead.
Lama. All right, we can debate this. We can debate this too. All right, thank you very much for joining us. And don't forget to call in at your call coming up next. All right.